before we get to buy lows and sell highs, I wanted to see who you're targeting. This week is different in terms of waiver wires. Like, there's only 2 teams on buy. Last week was the week from hell with 6 teams, and man, the top 13 running backs were like, I think 8 of them were definitely waiver wire pickups and still owned in sub 50% of most leagues out there. Is there a guy this week that you have like at the top of your list of a guy that you're looking to get this week as we head into week 8?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's good and bad to a week like this. And yeah, it's a pretty bad waiver wire week. When I tweeted it out last night, I put a bunch of the names in the tweet, and I got a couple responses that were just like, woof, like that's a rough list of names, right? This week, I think really the main guy is Kenneth Gainwell. And we saw Gainwell do some things earlier in the season. They went away from him a little bit, and they were trying to put more on Miles Sanders' plate, but now with Miles Sanders listed as week to week here, and the initial reports, it's a low ankle sprain. So we don't think it's going to be something that is going to keep him out for too long. But you look at this juicy matchup here going against the Lions, and you figure they're going to be able to put up some points, especially on the ground. The Lions are giving up the most fantasy points to running backs this year. So Gainwell, a great pickup. And if you want to get somebody on the cheap, you can get Boston Scott, who actually got more carries in the game than Gainwell did this week after Sanders went out. Gainwell ran more routes and played more snaps and more targets by far, but Scott did get more carries. So both those guys could have pretty good games, depending what the Eagles decide to do here, because we don't need to get conspiratorial, but there's a lot of talk that I don't know if you've talked about it yet already, but the Eagles, it might make more sense for them to let the Lions win this game as far as trying to get that first overall pick.
That's right. Yeah. Producer Tino, before we got on here, was like, I think the Lions may get their first win of the season here. How would that make you feel? And it's like, obviously people who know I follow the Philadelphia Eagles pretty closely. It'd make me feel all right. Like, it's like got 2 top 6 picks as of right now, owning Miami's as well. So I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of say, all right, maybe we'll lean with Boston Scott. Jordan Howard's going to be active. I don't think he's going to be a factor. But then, Justin, you will really officially know if the Eagles are into tanking if they roll out Jordan Howard this weekend coming. But I agree with you. I think Kenneth Gainwell has the most upside. We've seen him catch a couple of receiving touchdowns so far this season. He's been used inside the red zone. He's a great pass catcher. I do think that Boston Scott in a deeper format, will go kind of under the radar. It could be that cheap play. Remember a couple weeks ago, and we'll talk about the Bears backfield in the next segment because there are some questions when it comes to Chicago. A couple weeks ago, I know in a lot of my leagues, it was heavy Damian Williams, and Khalil Herbert was that guy who kind of went under the radar that you can get a little bit cheaper. And all of a sudden, he's been the guy over the past couple weeks. Boston Scott, I think, is a better pass blocker. I could see him getting some first and second down work, but I mean, why not just roll with Kenneth Gainwell and see what you really have in the kid that you drafted this past season? Who's a guy that you're looking to acquire? I said that this is peak trade season. It could be in a redraft, in a dynasty league, it could be, but maybe from just a redraft standpoint, who are some players that you have your eye on that you think maybe, hey, these guys could be available and they can help me out?
I mean, there's lots. One thing I'll say too is I think people frame it the wrong way. Like this time of year, people kind of act like teams that are in contention can go and take advantage of these teams that aren't doing so well. It could be mutually beneficial, right? Like if there's a team out there that only has 1 or 2 wins and they're holding Christian McCaffrey at this point, they can't really wait on him coming back. So McCaffrey's the kind of guy I've gone out and tried to get him a bunch of places, and he might not come back till week 10, maybe even later. All I need is 3 weeks from him, right? Week 15, 16, 17. That's all I'm looking for from a guy like that. But I just think you should look for trades that benefit both teams. And there's a lot of deals you can make, especially like you said, this time of year. We can start with the obvious ones. Let's look at DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and the same kind of situation where Russ is out. Things haven't looked as good this week. I know that DK Metcalf had the big long touchdown, but other than that, they barely used him. Tyler Lockett has that like mind meld with Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson's out, his numbers go in the tank, but Russ is going to be back here sooner rather than later. And that second half of the season, they're going to be just fine. I think that passing attack. So if you can go out and get those guys now where maybe a little rough here for another couple weeks, they have a bye week coming up too in week 9, I believe. And then after that, we might see Russ the rest of the way, and things will be a lot better. Geno Smith, they don't trust him. They're just running the ball constantly and going nowhere with it. So we need Russ back in that offense. And once he's back, things are going to look a lot better for Metcalf and Lockett.
I love that call. It's been back-to-back weeks where I've brought both of them up, and I think, you said it perfectly. I mean, if you're up near the top two, you can afford to make that kind of move and take on that risk for these couple weeks. It does sound like Russell Wilson's just a couple weeks away. They play Jacksonville, then they're on the bye, I do believe, so we could see him week 10. Like you said with CMC, I mean, to have those guys when it matters on your team, I mean, you may not be ranking those two wide receivers as top 30, 25 wide receivers with Geno Smith under center, but I know that you're probably going to rank them as top 20 wide receivers when Russell Wilson is back under center. I love that call. Absolutely. And I've been on the other side of it, honestly. I mean, I have DK in one league where I'm struggling, and I've made him available to people up at the top of my league. Like, guys, I can't afford DK got the touchdown yesterday and basically didn't really get any more looks until late in that game. I just can't afford the inconsistencies. I need guys right now. And then the bye week coming up, it's like, guys, you want DK? Like, the guy up at the top doesn't want anything to do with DK in my league. It's like, think about DK on your squad come week 15, 16, and 17. He's like, I don't want to really take on that risk. It's like, I think that's an opportunity to jump in. I got to ask you about Allen Robinson. Like, what do you do at this point with Allen Robinson, man? I just did a show with Jake, and Jake was giving me this guy or that guy. And man, you should hear some of the names that he mentioned, like Khalif Raymond or Allen Robinson, or Jalen Rager or Allen Robinson, Alan Lazard or Allen Robinson. Like, are you this point, his stock is at an all-time low?
Yeah,
probably don't feel great rolling him out. What do you do, man?
I wouldn't go near him. I mean, I picked him up. He got dropped in one of the leagues that I'm in last week, and I picked him up because I had bye week issues and played him. And I mean, I regretted it. It's, he's a guy that I don't think can come anywhere near your lineup at this point. And you hope that a rookie quarterback like Justin Fields is going to be able to, improve a little bit as the season goes along, but it's a real disaster in that offense right now. And you go up against a team like the Bucs where you have to throw against them, and we don't even really see big stats from him in that one. So I think he goes to your bench, and when we talk about players that you could drop list kind of guys, it really just depends who else is out there, who you're picking up. But I don't know if I go quite as low as some of those names you mentioned, like Khalif Raymond, but that just tells you where he's at. Like, that is where Robinson is at. And another guy like Darnell Mooney, his teammate, who it's kind of the same thing with him. You can't trust these guys in your lineup. So if there are players on the waiver wire that have that upside, have a chance to give you a big week or two, at this point, I am dropping those guys, because in addition to dropping him, you might put him on another team. Another manager picks him up like I did this week, and they end up actually being a roster clogger and hurting another team. So I think that's a smart move.
Yeah, good call. I mean, he's been a top 10 wide receiver in each of the past 2 seasons. I guess he's definitely going to leave Chicago. It'll be interesting to see where he goes maybe next year. It's been, I can't imagine how frustrated he is as a player inside an offense, just not really getting any looks or any targets, dealing with Matt Nagy and an inexperienced quarterback in Justin Fields. I guess, do you feel the same about Robbie Anderson? Is another guy who's getting a lot of targets, leads the league in drops, but at least he's getting targets.
He's getting targets. You'd think that at some point it's going to come around here, but there are so many problems. The only shining light for him is that they're going up against the Falcons this week. So you figure Darnold, I know there's been so much talk that, are they going to bench him again? Is it over? Are they going to trade for Deshaun Watson? This is the kind of get right matchup. You go up against the Falcons. They should be able to throw without issue in that one. So I don't know that I'm really putting Robbie Anderson in my lineup until I see him do it, but he's a guy that I'm willing to still hold on my bench here for a little while, just because, like you said, the volume's there. And normally when the volume's there, you eventually will see the production come his way.
I got a couple guys written over at ftnfantasy.com as do a trade target article every single week. Take a look at dynasty guys as well, players to hold and buy and sell and drop, all those guys. I wrote Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon and T. Higgins, but I don't really feel like those guys would actually be available. But when I looked at T. Higgins yesterday, I saw his ownership just drop 3% in like Yahoo leagues, and I was like, okay, so maybe people are dropping him in shallow 8 or 10 team leagues, but that also makes me think like maybe he's available with Jamar Chase getting all the attention. But Boone, like, he just had 15 targets last week, and you wonder what defenses do with Jamar Chase. Do they start to double this guy? I really like the direction of this Bengals offense. Like, those 3 players, Jones, Higgins, Mixon, are you into just holding them, buying them where you can?
Yeah, for sure. I think the Bengals look fantastic. I think, they had some struggles early in the season, and it was expected, right? With Burrow coming back from the injury and maybe not being quite himself or quite being on point for those first few weeks. But now we're starting to see them hit their stride. And Higgins is a guy that we saw what he could do last year, right? He has a lot of upside. And yes, Jamar Chase has come in and become that true number one. Jamar Chase might be the best receiver in the NFL right now. I don't know. But yeah, he's come in and taken over. That doesn't mean that Higgins can't put up big stats. They're going to throw the ball more before. We've seen that start to happen now with Burrow feeling a little more comfortable. I think the guy that really loses out here is Tyler Boyd, because Boyd had a couple good games, but when Higgins has been out there, when he's been healthy, Boyd really has taken a back seat. And Higgins, a touchdown scorer in an offense like this, yeah, a guy that I'm all over. I don't think that you're going to be able to get Mixon or Aaron Jones. I've seen some people mention Aaron Jones too as a potential buy low. I don't think so. I mean, the guy, he just comes with that name value as well. Even if he has a down week or two, people know the upside. He has that kind of 4 or 5 touchdown game in him at any moment. So I don't think you're really going to get him at a discount. I'm looking at some of the rookies potentially as buy lows right now. And I know everybody talks about Javonte Williams, but he's a guy that this is your chance. You try to get him now, and it's going to be over at some point here, because late in the season, that Broncos schedule, it is so good. They have a week 11 bye. Often we see the rookie running back after the bye week start to take on a little more. We don't know. Melvin Gordon's still doing okay there, but I'm really impressed by Javonte in the fact that we weren't sure if they were going to give him a big pass catching role. And he's really been involved as a pass catcher, has at least 3 targets or 3 catches, I believe, in every game in the last 5 or 6. You look at last week, he had 6 catches in that one. So they're willing to use him in that role. They're willing to use him kind of in every situation. And that's fantastic. That's what we want to see as the trust grows there. That late season schedule, I can't help but think that he is going to be a league winner for people. That was something I was looking at before the season. So I don't know. They're going to have a big game at some point, and all of a sudden that window is going to close. I'd be trying to get him while you still can.
Yeah, I do like that. I've written him up probably 5 weeks now as like a buy this guy where you can. And then last week I was just like, you know what? I may be done with him. Is he going to win me consolation brackets like Cam Akers did last season? But honestly, like you bring up a good point. That bye week, you could see the change. Melvin Gordon is on the last year of his deal here. He's been practicing in a limited fashion over the past couple weeks, but I see what you see. I see more targets out of the backfield. I see they're trusting him a little bit more when they're playing from behind. The first couple weeks, it was a very soft schedule, and it was a lot of Melvin Gordon just kind of getting him, familiar with the offense and Javonte. But it seems like every week, Boone, there's like a highlight reel play from Williams. I mean, he's such a terrific back, and he's picking up some blitzes. I agree. Now is probably the time to go ahead and get this guy. I wish that Melvin Gordon would completely go away so we could see just maybe a 70-30 split and see what kind of upside he does have inside that offense.
I mentioned the schedule there, but 6 of the Broncos' last 7 opponents are in the top 12 in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. So it is just so nice. Cupcake down the stretch for them. And yeah, very excited about Javonte.
We're starting to get some questions rolling here, but before we get into them, I want to know who's a guy that you're looking to flip off your roster. Who's a sell high candidate for you?
I don't know. I mean, there's a few. I don't know if this guy's a sell high, but Antonio Gibson, I'd be getting rid of him for whatever you can. And I know Schefter kind of had that report over the weekend that maybe he was feeling a little bit better with the shin issues that he's been having. But let's just take a look at it here. I mean, what he did early in the season, we got a little excited, right? He had 5 targets in week 1. So you think, okay, that projection we had before the year where the coaching staff was saying he's going to be more involved and they're going to use him more as a pass catcher, it's happening. Since then, barely at all. It's mostly just a couple catches a game. I don't think he's gone over 3 targets in any game since then. And now more recently with this injury, we're seeing his playing time dip down. He's down around 40% the last 2 games here. So I'm still worried that those issues are going to pop up with the injury, that eventually he's going to miss some time here. That scares me quite a bit. And I think based on the name value, you still have a shot to get rid of him. And I talked about making a trade for Christian McCaffrey. Actually, one of the McCaffrey deals where I got him, I traded Gibson as part of the package going the other way because I wasn't very confident here that it was going to be good for him. And you take a look even at their schedule coming up, and they got the Broncos this week. The Broncos, not a great matchup. They haven't been as good against the run recently. But then after that, week 9, they have a bye. They come back from the bye, and they're going up against the Buccaneers run D. We know how good they are in shutting down running backs. And after that, the Panthers run D, who are actually giving up the fewest points to fantasy running backs this year. So he's got a pretty tough stretch over the next little part here. And I think one of the things that's important this time of year is, in most leagues, the trade deadline's like around week 12 or so. I don't know if people have backed it up based on the extra week this season or not, but you have like a window here. You can just look at the next 3-4 weeks. Take a look at the schedule, make some deals now, get some players that can help you get some wins over the next month. And they're right before the deadline. Make some more trades to set yourself up for the playoffs. You don't have to necessarily just be looking at the fantasy playoffs at this point, especially when we're talking about running backs, because we know how often they can get hurt, right? So Gibson's for sure somebody I'd be trying to get rid of. DeAndre Hopkins is another one that I was saying maybe wait until after that Texans game, the revenge game. You almost were guaranteed a touchdown in that one, right? And he had an okay fantasy day there. But you look at it last year, he was averaging 10 targets a game. This year, he doesn't have 10 targets in a single game this season yet, right? So I think just with all the weapons they have there now, they've gone out, they've filled out the receiving core, they've added Zach Ertz at tight end. He's just starting now to take on some more work there. So I just have a hard time believing that they really need to pepper Hopkins as much as they did in the past. And that's not to say that he's a bad fantasy asset. I still think he's going to be a low-end wide receiver 1, maybe a high-end wide receiver 2. But if you can get that top 5 wide receiver value for him still, and I think he has a touchdown in 3 straight games here, so he's still putting up pretty good fantasy numbers, I would try to move off him at this point if you can.
Yeah, a lot of his production has been just via the touchdown. I saw that as well. And it's a lot of Arizona guys. I mean, I would make them available to everybody in my league, to be honest with you, just because of what you talked about. I mean, they run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. I mean, Zach Ertz just came in and had a touchdown. I agree his usage probably goes up. But in terms of just like running routes and targets, I mean, he wasn't even inside the top 3 or 4. I mean, Chase Edmonds is catching balls out of the backfield. There's a lot of mouths there in Arizona. So I certainly get that one as well. Let's get to some questions here. We got some people who are tuning in, would like to hear your thoughts. So Stephen Curry says, what are your thoughts, Justin, on Montgomery and Herbert rest of the season? What do you do? Do you consider flipping Herbert? He had one of the most surprising performances last week. I mean, the top 100 yards against that Bucs defense was pretty impressive, and he caught a couple passes as well. What do you make of this backfield moving forward? I mean, Montgomery's probably a couple weeks away.
Yeah, I think one of the worries with Montgomery, and we talked about this before the season, right? Last year when he put up those big stats, it was easy schedule and zero competition for touches. You had Tariq Cohen out. They didn't really have another option there to take on any work whatsoever. This year coming in, we looked at it. We said, okay, they went out and got Damian Williams. Now they actually do have a backup that could take on some work. Now Montgomery gets hurt. He's coming back. Yes, Williams is back healthy. It clearly is Khalil Herbert above Williams on the depth chart now, especially after we saw that last week. So I think now you're going to have that other guy, maybe even Williams as well, getting involved here. So I don't think that Montgomery has the same ceiling. Yeah, when he comes back, he'll still be sort of that low-end RB2. He'll get you some decent weeks if he can find the end zone, but he's not going to have that massive volume like he had last season. And the schedule might not be as easy as it was last year, because we saw a couple of those guys last season, Jonathan Taylor and Montgomery, have those really, really soft schedules down the stretch. So you look at it that way, and anybody that thinks that Montgomery could be an RB1, which I can't imagine that many people at this point, but before the season, there were some people that still felt that way. I don't think he's going to be that at all. So if you could deal him, and normally when you have a guy coming back off injury, you want to wait until like that week that he's about to come back, because then he's getting headlines, right? Everybody's talking about him. Maybe you can get the most at that point for him, but I would be trying to deal away Herbert and him if you can get decent value for them.
Yeah, I think Herbert's stock is at an all-time high right now. Anthony Silva says, should I trade Ridley and Schultz for Nick Chubb? It does sound like Nick Chubb is going to return here this week. Man, Dearness Johnson, I mean, that guy looked like an absolute superstar. I mean, credit to him, and also the offensive line in Cleveland, that's just so good. Calvin Ridley is interesting, right? I mean, he scored the touchdown last week. He's been disappointing. Kyle Pitts has shown up here over the past couple weeks. It was a big Pitts game. Schultz, he got Michael Gallup potentially turning to the lineup this week, and that's kind of where Schultz took off. Ridley and Schultz for Chubb, I guess it's all about context, I'm sure, as you know, Boone. Like, if you need a running back, I think that's a move that you could make. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the tough part with almost any roster question like this, right? You need all the other details involved. And sometimes people probably hate it, but I'll respond just asking. I need more information. Just give me, I need to know what else is going on with your team. Looking at this one, though, I would definitely take Chubb. It seems like they're pretty confident he's going to come back. Justina Anderson had that report yesterday that barring any sort of, setback that'll happen between now and the game, that we will see Chubb out there in week 8. Now, I think anybody that thought with Hunt out that Chubb could maybe get that top 5 workhorse volume, I don't think that's going to happen. I think from what we saw with Dearness Johnson, he can take on that number 2 role, and they tend to like to use more than one back. That being said, still love Nick Chubb, still think he's an RB1 in fantasy. And if you can go and get an RB1 at this point for Ridley, who one of the things that I think maybe we miscalculated on Ridley before the season, or I could say that I did, was Kyle Pitts coming along as fast as he does, a lot of the Ridley numbers that we looked at with Julio out, all of a sudden Ridley was putting up huge stats, averaging over 100 yards a game in the 7 games where Julio wasn't in the lineup last season. But now Pitts is stepping in, so Pitts kind of offset some of that Julio loss, right? And really, really there's been some other issues going on, obviously, but yeah, I don't think we can consider him up near, the top 5 or so, which before the season, we thought there was a good shot that he could even potentially lead the league in targets this year. And that's obviously not happening. And with the other weapons there, with Cordell Patterson so involved, I'm more than happy to move off from Schultz and Ridley, especially since we're going to have Michael Gallup back this week. So that could impact Dalton Schultz a little bit as well. So give me Chubb all day in that one.
Yeah, I would agree there. And I also agree that I think Dearness Johnson earned himself a couple touches here and there. I mean, why give Chubb 20 plus carries when you can lean on a guy that just proved, I mean, he basically won the game himself last week against the Broncos. Anthony did say he has Adams, MJJ, which I believe would be Marvin Jones Jr., I'm guessing there, Judy, Cooks at wide receiver. So yeah, I think you could make the move. I mean, it looks like you got a couple wide receivers. Maybe Judy comes back. Maybe you can make that move and get Chubb. One more adjustment before we get you out of here. William Real, who can I trade away to acquire Javonte Williams? He has Woods, Lockett, and Antonio Brown. RB position is poor. Aaron Jones, Pollard, and DJ Dillon on his roster currently. So he's looking to acquire Javonte Williams, Woods, Lockett, or AB. I mean, would you just deal Lockett? I mean, we talked about Lockett depending on the situation. If you could flip Lockett, would you make that move, or you want to hold him for that playoff run?
I don't want to hold him for that playoff run. I don't know that I'd want to trade any of those receivers, to be honest, for Javonte. That's one that, it's kind of tough. And I would recommend to people, I put out on Wednesday mornings, I put out a trade value chart. I haven't updated it yet this week, so it's a little harder for me to comment on some of these trades, but check that out over at the Score. Have trade values for basically everybody. I go pretty deep on those, and I know a lot of people love those. I get hit up quite a bit Wednesday mornings. Where's the chart? But yeah, for that one, I think I'd hang on to those receivers right now. I really would, or I'd try to, if you're going to get Javonte back, try to get to Javonte plus, because really value-wise, I don't think that you'd be getting, what those receivers are worth based on what they've done and based on what they can do the rest of the season. And Lockett would be the one if you had to pick out of them. But like we talked about already, Lockett's value is going to go way back up, so you don't want to sell low on him.
No, dude, I could chat to you all day, man. Hopefully we can do this again before the season does wrap up. Why don't you just plug what you're doing over at the Score and where people can check out your work?
Yeah, all my content's at the Score. Download the app. Everything's designed for the mobile app. Yes, you can click on the links on my Twitter page and you can see the website, but we try to design all the content to be viewed on mobile. So you can download the app for free. The Score Fantasy Football Podcast, which you've been on before. Going to have you on again soon. You can get that pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. So check that out. And yeah, lots of content. I'll have my first edition of my rankings go up Tuesday. So I'll have those out later today. We'll have a podcast episode previewing week 8 tomorrow. That trade value chart and lots more stuff. Start, sit, stash, quit, which I do on Fridays. So it's a very busy time of year, as you know, but it's a super fun time of year. And it's the time where, like you said, like we've talked about, you got to make moves right now to set yourself up for the second half of the season. We know plenty based on what we've seen so far, lots of weeks of data. So now you got to make those moves. And hopefully today we help some people figure some of those out.